So last week, just a quick recap of last week where we got done with half of my lesson, not the whole thing. So I've got, I am so disorganized right this very moment. Apologize. So we ended in that poem. Do you guys remember the poem with the pig and the heart? So the poem, and I forgot to get you a printed out copy of the poem, but I now that I said that out loud, but I will get you a printed out copy of the poem. But the whole point of the poem was to we were talking about what was that big like $5 word we were talking about. Does anybody remember? No, it was not circumcision. Just skip that one. Sanctification. It was sanctification. And remember, sanctification is something that happens instantly and ongoing. So when Christ comes into our heart, he instantly changes us. But then there's this ongoing process, right? It's an ongoing process. And you could almost think of it as just like birth, right? When a baby comes into the world, they're instantly a human, but they have an ongoing process of learning how to be a human. Otherwise, they would just be laying and crying and pooping, and you know, we have to move on from that. So it's the same. That's think of sanctification that way. There's an instant where it happens, and then there's an ongoing thing. So we instantly are sanctified, and then we ongoing need to become sanctified. We talked about sanctification as a process. The terminology means it's a process of getting ready. And we talked about we had the slide of things that you get ready for, like a vacation or a wedding or a new job, or all of these things. These are, I think, I had showed the picture to somebody and they said, "Oh, doing taxes." Okay, you get ready to do your taxes too. You get all of your stuff together, but that's kind of the process of sanctification. It's getting ready so that when something happens, you're ready. We learned what freedom means, and we're going to talk more about that today. So there was the verse that was that we're set free. We're free from the law, but not free that we could just do whatever we want. But we're free from that idea that we're bound by the law and we will never be able to get to God. Instead, we have grace that brings us in an adoption relationship with God, and we already are connected to Him. And Ethan, I think the very first slide was the one that I had showed last week with grace and the law, where we're already on that grace level. But when we try to add the law to it, we kind of fall from grace. That's our Christian life. We just kind of we want to add something. But with the law, you can never get up to the level of grace. Grace is far better than the law. So we talked about that, and I gave you my poem about the little lamb. And on our own, we can't keep ourselves clean, but through a relationship with Christ, our desires change. Have you seen that in your own life? That maybe before you knew Christ, maybe you had a really horrible temper, or a bad mouth, or there were things that you just felt compelled to do. The longer you have a relationship with Christ, or the closer you are, the more these things just don't even appeal to you. It's not even that you're convicted that they're wrong. They're not even appealing anymore because your life has moved into a different direction. That's part of sanctification. And then I talked to you, I gave you the last example I gave right before I left with my cousin Claire, who, here's a cheap plug, her dad will be here on Sunday night when we do our hymn sing, and her dad is an awesome banjo player. And if you don't like banjo music, that's okay. You'll like him because he's my favorite person he's my favorite family member that's not like my direct family member. So you will love my Uncle Pat, and you can ignore that he plays the banjo and still love him too. But Claire is Pat's daughter, and she just got back from Ireland, and she now has this really thick accent, this big Irish accent. She's been there for several years. And I was saying how the more time we spend time with God, the more we sound like Him, the more we look like Him, the more we act like Him. Just like Claire, the more she spent time in Ireland, the more she sounded like an Irish person and talked like an Irish person and picked up all. That's who we are. We become what we surround ourselves by. That's just human nature. That's why, what's that phrase? Bad company corrupts good morals is 100% true. Bad company corrupts good morals. because we become like the people that we're around. So it behooves us to find people that are also following God. And we talked about how sanctification can happen just by coming to church, just by going to Bible studies, just by spending time with other Christians. That impacts you and it changes your thinking. So today we're going to finish up chapter 5, and we're going to start by reading Galatians 5:7 through 12. So I will read that for you. You were running well. Who hindered you from obeying the truth? This persuasion is not from him who calls you. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. I have confidence in the Lord that you will take no other view, and the one who is troubling you will bear the penalty, whoever he is. But if I, brothers, still preach circumcision, why am I still being persecuted? Is that case the offense of the cross? In that case, the offense of the cross has been removed. I wish those who would unsettle you would emasculate themselves. Okay. So it starts out saying, you were doing so good. Like I told you about the gospel. You changed your way of thinking. You were bringing more people in. You were doing so good. I was so proud of you. You were really growing. And it wasn't Christ that changed your mind. That's what he's trying to say. When he says, I have to open it myself so I can go back to the different verses. But when he said, you were running so well, who hindered you from obeying the truth? The persuasion did not come from him who calls you. So this idea that you should add the law into grace, that didn't come from Christ. It wasn't him that came up with this idea, but rather it was somebody else. And I want you to know I'm clearly not preaching circumcision, so don't blame it on me, because it was not me that said this. It was somebody completely outside of this. It's not Christ. It's not me. Because see, even adding the smallest thing changes the character of it all. A little bit of leaven leavens the whole lump. So if you've ever made bread, you know that little bit of yeast changes the whole character of the dough that you made. It all of a sudden it'll rise. If you add a lot of, you can have it really rise. You can make really big bread, but even the smallest bit of leaven changes the dough. Even the smallest thing that you're adding to grace changes all of grace. It's not grace anymore because you're doing something. And when you talk about that, you'll find that it's actually a very selfish thing that we're doing, even though we don't mean to be selfish. Just that little thing that we add, we're just going to add that one little thing, changes it all. The cross is mentioned as a stumbling block, and it's hard to accept. It's hard for us to accept that we can do nothing more than what was already done. Don't we all feel like this obligation to do something extra? Like I got to do something more because I was really bad and God forgave me, and I got to do something more to make up for this. Like there's got to be something else I can do. I have to add something more to grace. We want to be able to add value. And those that said everyone needs to be circumcised, that last verse, they should emasculate themselves. You don't preach on that kind of stuff enough. I mean, I really think you should get those big words out there. Those people that were saying this, they're all Jews. They've all been circumcised at birth, 7 days after birth. They don't remember it. Doesn't hurt. There's no mental scars from this. But they're telling grown adults, you need to get circumcised. So Paul said, you know what? They should emasculate themselves. They should just cut the whole thing off if that's what they think is going to, if that's what's going to make them holy. Let's make it really holy. I know it's very uncomfortable. All the guys are so uncomfortable. But that's what they're saying. You want someone to do something? Start with you. Start with you. Show me how much you really believe this. You start. They should have some skin in the game, no pun intended. When it hurts you to do it, you think twice about requiring it. If it's gonna hurt me, I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I want to do that. If I can comfortably follow the rule, it's gonna be a good rule. You should all follow my rule because it's comfortable. But if it's a rule that's gonna make me uncomfortable, then I don't think any of us should have to follow that rule. We'll skip that one. Now, um, often we hold on to the tightest, the things that we think we should do to get into heaven are the things that don't affect us at all. Those are the things that we hold tightest to. Um, I personally think that you should. I'm making up something that doesn't affect me at all. I've never done an illegal substance, like illegal drug in my life, so it would be easy for me to say. And I'm not saying that they're okay, by the way, but it's easy for me to say drugs are bad because that's nothing I've ever struggled with. I don't even understand to struggle with it. So I can hold that flag up really high. But someone else might be really struggling with that, and they're just trying to get into this relationship with God, and they have a new relationship with Him, and the sanctification is occurring and it's ongoing. And if I'm defining everybody that's done drugs as a really bad person, I am hurting people that are just coming into faith with Christ. So now we're going to start in this next section. There's a couple of verses. Before I read them, we're going to start a new section where we're going to define freedom. So there's 3 types of lives we can live. And I mean, you can live whatever kind of life you want, but you're going to live one of these 3. Either, first of all, you're going to live a life of legalism, where we've already talked about why this doesn't work, but we're working to earn our salvation. We're going to live a life of legalism where we're just going to earn it, we're going to work in it, we're going to earn it and earn it. Then on the other extreme, we can live a life of license where we are going to use our dependence on God to live however we want to. I'm going to do whatever I want to because I know there's grace. And you know what? Those 2 things are not as far apart as we think they are, because both of them are all about me. I'm going to do something to earn it, or I'm going to do whatever I want because I already deserve it. So both of those opinions are all very selfish. They're all about me. The third one is the life of liberty, where we just started to talk about this, where we live in our adoption, which I've talked about adoption enough times now, where you know that we are going to take on this new person. We are now a new identity. This life of liberty, we live in our adoption with Christ as the head and the Spirit leading us, and it's not about us at all. That's the life that we want to live, where what we choose to do, how we live, it's not about, does it feel good for me? Because that's what the 2 other extremes are. It feels good because I want to do it, and I just want to do it, period. Or it feels good because I feel like I've kind of paid my debt, so I earned something. Both of those are both wrong, and they're both extreme. So, Ethan, let's read 5:13 through 15. For you were called to freedom, brothers. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word. You shall love your neighbors as yourself. That's a lot more than one word, but love was the word there. But if you bite and devour one another, watch out that you are not consumed by one another. So again, that he's talking about that legalism and and the license. Don't think that grace is a free get out of jail free pass that you're just holding on to, and you're like, nope, you can't. I think about ambassadors from other countries that come here, and they could do a lot of things wrong, and then they could just pull out their card, and we can't like throw them in jail or do anything with them because they got their card. That is not what salvation is like. That we are in our denomination, we used to have, our youth group was Christ ambassadors, CAs, meaning we are ambassadors for Christ. But it doesn't mean we're in a foreign nation and we have this card that gets us out of jail free. We're supposed to be His representation in a country, not being as bad as we can and getting away with it. And a lot of people use their salvation like it's their get out of jail free card. Paul is hardly even addressing it here because it's so ridiculous. It's so wrong. It is absolutely not what we're supposed to do. But we're supposed to focus on Christ, and God is love. Give love to each other. Relate to each other in love. And then he goes into this whole Christian cannibalism thing. Not really, like you're not really going to eat each other, but the verses that he used here, where can you go back to that again, Ethan? Oh, only do not turn your wait. But if you bite and devour one another, take care that you are not consumed by one another. The word bite there in the original language is backbite, or like snip at people, gossip, not even gossip, it's backbite. Like I'm gonna cut you down behind your back, to say bad things about you behind your back. Don't backbite each other, because you'll be devoured. Don't back, but if you bite and devour one another, and that word devour means to finish off, eat completely. If you bite and devour each other, watch out that you're not consumed. The word consume there is destroyed. It isn't okay to bite and devour each other. You'll be consumed yourself. But what does that mean? It means there's a biblical way to handle sin, and it's not done by whispering behind people's backs. It's not done by saying, "Did you hear what Leanne did?" Let me tell you. I'm going to tell you what Leanne did. But don't let her know that I told you. We need to pray more effectively for Leanne. Like, that's not okay. Because the next thing I know, if I'm telling that to Victoria, Victoria is going to tell Kelly, "Did you hear what Sara did?" And it ends up the whole everybody knows what everybody else did, right? We're going to know everybody's flaws, but we haven't done anything about it besides create one of our own, besides sin on our own by tattling on everybody and not really addressing the sin. Passive aggressive confronting the issue is not it either. Like, well, that's a brave choice. When you're doing something, well, that was a. Did you hear Victoria say it? That was a brave choice. Wasn't that a brave choice? I don't know if I'd say that. That was brave. The opposite of cannibalism of each other is love. Shining God's love lets God influence the behavior, and sometimes it helps change our judgment because we see things through God's eyes instead of our own. Because our own are very clouded with our perceptions. I was watching today. I love TV a little bit too much. That's one of my many flaws. But one of my favorite shows to watch, because you guys all know I love Ancestry. So on Channel 2, there is a whole, I don't remember exactly what it's called, but it's a whole ancestry thing where they go through people's lives. And today they were going through someone's life, and she was talking about how she did, her whole family just hated their grandfather, because he was such a horrible person. And as you start unfolding the story, there was so much more to the story than they understood. His life was so much more difficult than they understood. And the ways, problems he did had to do with things that as a child. He didn't understand something a lot more grace. There's a lot more patience and love. We like to judge. We like to judge each other often by what we see right in front of us, and not by any of the background story. And God knows the whole thing. So if we just let God work, we handle things, how we talk to people, and how God will smooth out the edges because he knows the story. Now, I am personally very legalistic. I will be honest about that. I was raised that way. I had a lot of rules growing up. And I mean, Dad, you would agree. I had a lot of rules. We were very legalistic. I had a lot of rules. As a child, I needed the rules, right? Because I don't know where the lines are. I need the rules to make sure that I stay in the right place. I've talked to you about how people that do big presentations on stage, where the lights are all dim, they'll have tape on the stage so they know where the edge is, so they don't fall off. It's kind of like a rule. You need rules. When you're growing, you need the rules so you don't go crazy. As an adult, I realized the reason behind the rules. Some of them I agreed with. Some of them I'm like, I don't think I get that one, but I understand. For me, though, there are some things that might be totally okay. Like if Kelly and I sat down and like, what do you feel your freedom allows you to do? He might have a list of things I'm like, oh, I can't do that. And I might have a list and he says the same thing. Oh, no, that's not okay for me. For me, though, if I go, and I'm not saying it's wrong for any of you, but I'm just using Kelly as an example. If Kelly does, I don't know, let's say Kelly feels comfortable speeding and I don't. which is totally false because I speed too. But regardless, let's say that Kelly feels really comfortable speeding. And I'm like, ooh, that's a bad one. If I thought, well, Kelly's a really good guy though. I mean, I see Christ in him, and you can see the light of the Lord, and he is a good Christian man. And if he can speed, I can speed too. For me, it's rebellion. There's a sin of rebellion in my heart because for me, it was always wrong. And I'm not doing it because I feel good about it now. I'm doing it because, well, if Kelly could do it, I could do it. If Leanne could do it, I could do it. And we start comparing ourselves to each other. We're in different places. God has a different relationship with each of us as he's growing us. And for me, it's rebellion. I can't do it. Even if it's okay for everybody else, I can't do it. And sometimes that kind of makes me a little bit mad, but it's true. And again, the action itself may not be a sin at all. We were talking about speeding. It might not be a sin at all, but it's for God to decide. And in my heart, not that particular thing, but in my heart, it would be a sin because I'd be rebelling against something this was wrong. I can't do this. And for me, it's wrong. Here's another example. I use my mom and dad a lot, and I know my dad hates this, but movies. My parents never went to movies, and I shouldn't say never because that's not true. They used to go to movies many, many years ago, before probably 55 years ago, they would go to movies. But they went to one time, and it's one that we'd see on TV. I won't even mention it. It's one you'd see on TV today. It would be no big deal today. But 55 years ago, when they saw that, it was, what is going on here? This is sin after sin after sin. And if we were going to be honest, if you turn on the TV today, there's sin after sin after sin, and movies, sin after sin after sin. And is this what I need to be filling my mind with? And they walked out of that movie, and after paying for it, so it's kind of hard because we sometimes will sit through stuff we shouldn't because we paid for it, so we don't want to leave. But walked out of it and never went back to another one. But the idea wasn't that they're gonna condemn everybody else that went to one. But for them, if Christ came back while I was sitting in this theater, how would I feel? That's the answer that they had to answer for themselves. What would I say? What were you doing? Oh, nothing. I wasn't really doing anything. I wasn't enjoying it. It's better for them. For them, they just walked out. Now, there are really good Christian people that watch movies all the time. It doesn't make them a better Christian. It doesn't make my dad and mom a better Christian. Again, this period of sanctification, and what's okay for them and not okay for them might be different for each other. And we have to understand that. Now, that's not to talk about pure on sin. There are things that God talks about. But we're going to talk about more than that, because instead of judging sin, let's talk about judging fruit. Let's be fruit inspectors. So let's read Galatians 16. Well, I guess this is going to be sin. We're going to go right into the sin part first. Galatians 5:16 through 24. I just want you to know, by the way, I hate all of these lists because there's always one thing or two things on there that I'm like, oh, that one's me. Let's skip those words. But we will read the whole thing. But I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not carry out the desires of the flesh. For the flesh sets its desires against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. For these are in opposition to one another, so that you may not do the things you please. If you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Now the deeds of the flesh are evident. Here we go. They are immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmities, strife, jealousy, outbursts of anger, disputes, dissensions, factions, envying, drunkenness, carousing, and things like these, of which I forewarned you, just as I have forewarned you that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against these things there is no law. Now, those who belong in Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. That was kind of icky. Let's just move on. It might even be, yeah, it might be even a little bit more. So, walking by the Spirit, you will not carry out the desires of the flesh. That's a pretty big statement, because I think we all fall into some of that, falling into the desires of the flesh, whatever they look like. But it's a litmus test to walk and you follow and you live in the Spirit. You walk after the Spirit, you follow, and you live. There's a double negative in there that says, no, you will not. Do not do these things. Literally, the desire of your human nature, you will not carry out. No, you will not carry out your desires. We have this new nature and we have this old nature, and they war against each other all the time. And remember on the Flintstones when you were kids, there would be like the little green guy on his one shoulder and on his other shoulder, and they'd argue all the time. That's really truly us. We've got our old nature and our new nature, and they're fighting all the time about what we should do. And we need to follow the Spirit and not try on our own to follow our human nature, because if we're not following the Spirit, we're just back doing whatever that bad guy says, because he's louder and he sounds like a lot more fun. He always has these better ideas. So think of a minefield. You know, when they have wars and they bury mines in these minefields that can blow up as soon as you step on one. Think of a minefield. One wrong step and we blow up. Just one wrong step. We need to follow the Spirit, because he tells us exactly where to walk. You know, take 3 steps to the left, take 1 step forward, go kitty corner to the right. We don't want to be reading a map and find out that we had it upside down, sideways, backwards, because we'll be stepping in the wrong place. And we don't want to use our own knowledge and simply say, well, that dirt doesn't look like it's been disturbed for a while. I think I'll step there. We want to be, and when I was praying about this, one of the things I was thinking about is the idea of being tethered to the Spirit, where you can't even, you don't want to take a step on your own because he's pulling us in the right direction, you know, and it's up to us because he's going to lead us, but we don't have to follow. The person that's leading is usually in front. I want to be tethered to the Spirit so that he doesn't go too far. I don't want to be on my own, because I know that if I go on my own, I'm going to blow up. And you know what? I have made huge mistakes in my spiritual walk. After I became saved, I have done huge things that were horribly wrong, because instead of holding on to the Spirit and following right behind him, like, you go on ahead and I will meet you on the other side, because I just have to take care of this over here, and went totally amok because I wasn't going where the Spirit was going. I think I've got a list of words that you probably won't be able to read, but let's see. So on the list of the bad things that we read, there's several of them. So depending on your version, because you said you had some other words, adultery might have been there. That's not always in all of the best manuscripts, but it definitely does. It definitely is part of this. Fornication, which is prostitution. Actually, the word in the Greek means immorality, sexual immorality. It's from the word porneia, which I bet you can guess what word we use today that comes from porneia. So harlotry, whoredom, these are all big words to say. Microphone. But pornography, all of that stuff comes in this immorality. The first thing that's listed. Impurity. The next one is uncleanliness or impurity. That comes from that word akatharsia, but it means physically or morally impure, just doing things that are not right. And it more than pornography. Like there's the next level, you can maybe don't use your imagination, but just keeps going down. The next one is uncleanliness. Lasciviousness, which goes down to brutality and sadism. I mean, now we're on the dark web. We're in the very bad part of the web. That's what this is about. Sensuality, lasciviousness, which is reflecting or producing sexual desire or behavior, especially that considered indecent or obscene. So that's what this whole part. So The first three or four things, depending on your list, are all sexual sins. Then we move on to religious sins, idolatry, which is the worship of idols, and witchcraft. And the word there comes from pharmakia, pharmaceuticals, drugs. So it talks about really drugs, pharmakia, um, sorcery. Think about it, if you're trying to figure out how drugs fit in. In the 60s, when I was barely alive. Because nowadays I'm like really the oldest person in the room half the time, but I was barely alive in the 60s. But in the 60s, a lot of people did drugs because it opened your mind. You got to be closer to God. That's this witch. That's it. Don't think you're gonna do drugs to get closer to God. That's what this text is saying. So those are religious sins. Then there's social sins. So there's hatred, and I would actually separate out the following as social sins, but also something that could easily happen within the church. So first, the social sins they have there's the hatred, the contentiousness, rivalry or jealousness. When we get to enmity, the first one, it's really disputes, it's contention, it's a faction or cliques. Think back to high school. Cliques. That's that enmity, like it's us against you, and the contentiousness is dissension, division, standing apart. Like I'm not going to be. I will. I want to get. Let's be against. Who should be against? Let's be against Ellie. All of us. We're not going to like Ellie. Okay, we need Ellie today. That's this dissension and division. We're separating ourselves from Ellie. Or factions. Like Ellie and the other half don't. And so the ones that like Ellie should sit over here, different groups. And I would say that these sins actually happen in the church. All of them. And I'm not saying like our church, but in church. They happen in church. They happen between denominations. They happen within one church body. They happen between churches. They just happen in the church. Factions are a subset starting their own group. We had an example of this in the church that I was at, where there was a guy who was an excellent teacher, very brilliant. So he said, well, come over to my house for Bible study. And the next thing you know, instead of just Bible study, now we're talking about the pastor, and we don't really like the pastor, and we should all get together and we should do something about this pastor. And it becomes a subsect starting their own group within the church. And then envying, holding a grudge, spite. So strife, seditions, which are divisions, heresies or parties or sects, sects, envying, and then your version might have murders. That's not in some of the best manuscripts, but definitely that would be bad too. Then there's these personal sins of I put murders probably down there. Drunkenness and revelries, or revelries would be carousing. And carousing would probably lead us back up to the top, where the central sins, it kind of just goes around, where these are the sins that he brought out. Now, I don't particularly like those. On our own, this list is exactly who we are. And we can say, well, I don't go that far. Not today, but if you kept following your own personal desires and lusts and whatever, this is where you end up. This is what it looks like. This is who we are as people. This is exactly who we are, because we need to fill ourselves with whatever makes us feel good. So you keep going. This feels good, so this will feel better, and it just keeps going. And then you have to feel better about yourself, so you have to talk bad about other people because you already feel bad about yourself. So you have to talk about other people to make yourself better. This is who we as people are. We fulfill our own desires, and this is the outcome. But if we follow the Spirit, what does that look like? It looks like love. The opposite of all of those sexual sins or sensual sins, I guess I put a nicer word up there, is love. Because love isn't involved in all those. Those are all one-sided, what makes me happy things. It's not a love relationship. Love is the opposite of all of those things. What's the opposite of the need for idols or for witchcraft? Joy or peace. What about patience? What about the strife and the arguing and setting your own groups and all that stuff? Well, we've got patience, we've got kindness, goodness, faithfulness. If we were faithful, we're certainly not going to be trying to strike out on our own. And gentleness, self-control. All of those are the opposite of these words. It's fellowship too, yep. Self-control is the exact opposite of drunkenness and carousing, for sure. It just is. Because there's drinking and then there's drunkenness. And what's the difference between those two? Self-control. This isn't something that we can do on our own. The fruit of the Spirit. When we get to the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. This isn't something we can do on our own. We could work really hard on one of them. Say, I'm going to be really patient. But are you really patient? Or are you just not saying anything when you really want to because you're trying to be patient? I'm going to be really patient. And you can ask me the same question 563 times today, and I'm going to be patient with you every time. But you're not. Your inside is not patient. You've just become patient on the outside, but the inside is really spoiled fruit. It's not really patience. We don't just do our best. Rather, it's something that the Spirit does in us. If you want to see a horrible lawn, you should come over to my house because there's a whole bunch of sticks in the backyard. And not one of those sticks has a leaf on it. That's just on the ground. And, some of them are really nice straight sticks. They're probably really good sticks. But they cannot produce a leaf on their own. And if they were from an apple tree, there'd be no apples on that stick. Because the stick doesn't produce fruit. We don't produce fruit. The Spirit produces fruit. It's just on us. It's just part of who we are. A tree gets that nourishment from its roots, and the root system brings that nourishment up, and the fruit ends up on those branches. It wasn't that the branch was such a great branch that it had a whole bunch of fruit on it. It was that the tree was healthy. The tree produced fruit. At no time did the branches jump off of the tree in the middle of the night and then come back on. They'd probably jump off, but they never go back on. And then think, oh, now I'm going to produce more fruit. But we do that. We think we'll disconnect from God. And then we'll somehow jump back on and we'll look, I'm so patient and kind and good. But we're not. Because none of those things are us. All those things are fruit of the Spirit. It's all of a sudden, they can be seen in you. It isn't you. Renee is a very sweet person. She's a very, very sweet person. But on her own, she's not good. On her own, she's not good. She's not, and you're probably all these things, but you're not. On your own, you're not. With God, we can see that goodness in her. We can see that kindness. Ellie, can you think of anyone kinder? But if you talk to her, she'd say, oh, I'm not kind. But that's how God manifests himself in her, is this kindness, is this fruit that she's producing. And it just is an overwhelming fruit in her that you see that's just a reflection of God. Through God, through love. So let me back up a second. We don't just do our best, rather it's something that the Spirit does in us. The law, if we were trying to follow the law, it restrains us and kind of keeps us in bounds, but the Spirit constrains us, not restraining, not keeping us, but constrains us to give us a new nature. It keeps us kind of in bounds. It helps us to be more like Christ. What God required under the law, the Spirit produces automatically. We don't have to try to follow the law. We just follow the Spirit and we become better people. We become more like Christ. We shine His light without even attempting it, because we're focused on this relationship. And as we get closer to that relationship, or again, putting it in a different language, like my cousin Claire, she's fully immersed in that lifestyle in Ireland, and it just comes out. You're fully immersed in following Christ, and it just comes out. She's not thinking, now, how do they say that? Let me try to say it just like them. So you can say, hello, 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 hello. That's not what she's doing. It just comes out because she's immersed herself in that. As we immerse ourselves in Christ, he just comes out. And it doesn't look the same for all of us, because this fruit of the Spirit, some people in the original manuscript, they say that the fruit of the Spirit is love. And then all of these other things are added on. But love just adds up. All these things get added on to us. What following the law made us a slave, and we were afraid. But grace makes us a son, makes us a child. We don't have to follow under fear, like God's going to strike me dead. But man, I love the Lord. Don't you love the Lord? And the more that you love the Lord, and the more you realize that you have this relationship with God, and he loves you, and you love him, you become more like him without even trying. Through love, grace frees the believer to do what's right. It's no longer, I have to do this, and oh, let me try to do this. And I would really encourage you today, because I was telling my dad and my husband, I don't know if I've ever really heard a sermon on this, but because we hear the fruits of the Spirit, we think, well, I better produce some fruit. So let me get my thinking cap on and really try to do these things. And it's not about what we do. I mean, it is, but it's not about trying to be more patient or trying to be more good or trying to be more kind. Because if we try on our own, I don't know about you, but I have a job where people ask me questions all day long, and I don't know why they can't think like me, because I will answer the same question all the time. I could record it and just push a button, and we could move on. And that is not, I'm not very patient when it comes to that. So if I thought to myself, today I am going to be the most patient ever, they'd ask me the question more times than usual. I'm positive of it. And I would say, look, I have no fruit. I'm going to judge myself. Look, I have no fruit because I am not patient. I have no fruit. Now, God is still working on me on some of those things. But there's other fruit that I am producing because I am following him. And, if he worked on all of our faults all at once, we'd just be like gum. There would be none of us left, because, oh, that's not right. We have to fix that. Oh, that's all. I mean, there'd be nothing left. But he molds us carefully. He like a potter with clay. There's pieces that he slowly moves off and takes care of us, so that we're not just like, just put me in whatever you want me to. We have the ability to have a relationship. That's the beautiful part about this. Except the fruit is built on relationship, and as we have relationship with him, our fruit changes, and we're like, oh, where did that come from? That was me? No, it wasn't me. It was God. Look what God did. I can't believe it, because that's not me. That's not my character, but look what God did. Our best attempts to be good, they were crucified with Christ. In the one verse way early on, I've been crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, but yet not I, but Christ lives in me. Our best attempts to be good, they were crucified with Christ. As we were adopted by him, we became part of the family, or in this analogy, part of the vine. We're now part of the vine. We produce fruit, but not on our own, but from the roots that are connected through Christ. We just hold on to faith. Like, really, the branch just has to hold on to the tree. Like, that's all it has to do to get fruit. All it has to do is just stay connected. Like, it doesn't have to do anything else but stay connected. Now I know that branches don't think, but we do, and we're called branches of a vine. We just have to hold on. Just hold on and focus on what matters. What matters is our relationship with Christ. The rest of it is beautiful, and it comes in its own time, and it comes to fruition. And there's different parts flowering and budding, and different parts of us dying off all at the same time. But we're focused on the vine. If we're not on our own, we just can't do it. If we aren't producing fruit. So if you look at this list and you say, well, so the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. And you get to the end, you're like, well, that wasn't me. Like, none of this. I'm not good at any of these things. These are all bad. Are we trying to do it on our own? Think about it just 1 second. Think about it. Are you trying to do it on your own? Because if you're trying to do it on our own, you're not going to find that you fit into those any of these. But if you fall in love with Jesus, you fall in love with Jesus, and you spend your time getting to know Him, all those fruits they just happen. And maybe they're not. You don't have the best looking ones yet because you're still in progress. But you have some. Acknowledge, you know, Lord, I can't believe you did this in me. I know who I am, and I can't believe that I could be that kind because I'm not a kind person. I can't believe, Lord, that was you. You actually showed up and showed right through me. Let's read the last two verses, 5:25 and 26. If we live by the Spirit, let us also walk by the Spirit. Let us not become boastful, challenging one another, envying one another. Walk by the Spirit. This word, so there was another part where it told us to walk with the Spirit way back last week, where it said to walk in the Spirit. And that word walk meant literally what it sounds like, walk, just walk. This word here, though, now I'm going to read it again, and then I'm going to tell you what the word walk means. If we live by the Spirit, let us also walk by the Spirit. That word walk right there means the same as a child, an infant, when they're first learning to walk. When you walk, they fall over more than they stand up, and they get up and they do it again, right? You don't see little kids fall over and say, well, that's it, I'm not walking. Instead, they get up and they try again, and they keep trying again, and they keep falling over and they keep trying again. If you live by the Spirit, when you live by the Spirit, let us walk by the Spirit. Keep going. If you fall, stand up, keep going. Don't give up, just keep going. It's a learning process. It's realistic. This is not an idealistic verse. It's a realistic verse. An idealistic would say, well, if you live by the Spirit, you just walk by the Spirit, and you should be good. That's not what this says. If you live by the Spirit, you're gonna fall down. Get up. Come on, get up. Let's go. Let's get up and keep walking. That's what this verse says. It's a realistic verse. You live by the Spirit. Get up. Let's keep walking. You're gonna keep doing this. Besides, this is your walk. It's not anyone else's. And we should be supporting each other in our walks. Which is another part of this, that let us not become boastful and challenge one another, envying one another. Rather, again, let that fruit of the Spirit be love, helping each other through the walk. We're in different places, but we're following the same Spirit, and we're trying for this. We love the same God, and that doesn't mean I'm going to say, you really need to stop doing this, you need to stop doing that, but rather, like we just said to Ellie, I see the kindness of God in you, and it shows so much, and I don't know if you see that. Words of encouragement to each other, not just to say something, but truth. The truth. Say the truth. The things that really impact each other, because it's how we support each other. I don't want to say, man, Ellie is so nice. Wish I was nice. Let's be mean to her, please. She's too nice. We need to see what she's like, which is not nice. Let's see if we can make her not be nice. That's because I'm envious, or because I'm boastful about myself. I can be nicer than Ellie. We don't want to do that. We want to encourage each other. I know my time is up. All right. You had a question. Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. Right. So I don't know if you guys all heard about what she's saying is we all have things that we do good. And we all fail. We all fall. But it's that getting up that's making all the difference. Getting up. And again, holding on to the vine. So going back to what Paul is really saying, I don't want you to think I'm like making up my own sermon here. This is really what Paul is talking about when he's saying, don't add the law. There is enough to do by just holding on to Christ. You don't need to add any rules to this. Hold on to Christ. Because the law doesn't produce fruit, but grace does. Hold on to Christ. Just keep holding on to him. Have him be what you follow. Follow rules. Follow him. Because by following him, what you're doing is falling in love with him. You're going to do the things he wants to do. For those of you that are in a relationship or have been married or whatever, there are things that you probably don't do or do because your spouse really likes them, right? Because you know them well enough. And you're like, well, this is a silly one in our house, but we never sit on high chairs. My husband doesn't like sitting on chairs where his feet dangle. I don't understand it. I love sitting on. I'm tall, so if I can ever sit on a chair where my feet dangle, I'm super excited. But he hates it. I mean, really hates it, and it's not worth it to me to sit on a chair that my feet dangle because I can do it on Wednesdays. But it's one of those things. I know him well enough, so I never say, "Hey, look at that chair with the feet dangling. Let's go sit over there." I just wouldn't do that because I know it. As we know God, and that's a silly example, but as we know God, we know the things that he wants us to do, and we want to please him, and we want to do things that please him, not so we can get a reward or something, but because we love him. Because we love him and we care about our relationship with him. Did you have something you wanted to say? Okay. I don't, but I'll catch you after and we'll see if we can find it. Well, let's pray because it's 8:00, 8:02. Guys, I heard the alarm. So, Father, thank you so much that you made salvation so easy and we just make it so hard. And Lord, help us to just keep our mind focused on you. Help us to keep the easy part front of mind. We just want to add something or we want to take advantage of grace, but just being tethered to the Spirit, that means that we are focused on you. And sometimes, Lord, our human nature just gets the best of us and we want to just say, no, I don't think I want to be tethered to you today. I want to do what I want to do. Forgive us for those times, Lord. Help us to reflect you in our lives. Help us to spend more time with you, to focus on you, to be the people you want us to be. This life is so short, Lord. Help us to impact lives around us because we reflect you. I pray that as we go our separate ways, you'll be with us. Help us, Lord, to remember that you are the one that produces the fruit, not us. In your name we pray.